Well, President Obama just wrapped up an interview that we'll tell you about in a moment. But first, when the president started to realize that his Obamacare rollout was going to be a big problem, he tried to convince Americans that we would be better off under his plan. He tried to find success stories like this.
I recently received a letter from a woman named Jessica Sanford in Washington State. And here's what she wrote. I am a single mom, no child support, self-employed, and I haven't had insurance for 15 years because it's too expensive. I was crying the other day when I signed up. So much stress lifted. That's what the Affordable Care Act is all about.
But that single mom's excitement quickly turned to disappointment. Jessica Sanford has now learned the Affordable Care Act isn't going to be affordable for her after all.
It was a huge disappointment, and especially since I had, my story had been shared by the president, I felt like, I just felt really embarrassed that, he had quoted my story, and then come to find that the Washington Health Plan Finder, the website here in our state, had grossly miscalculated, or they're having a problem figuring their tax credits. And so at least for right now, I'm not going to be getting insurance.
Well, millions of Americans are frustrated with the president and his deceit, and it's showing in the polls. Opposition to Obamacare has just hit a record high. 57% oppose it. And Gallup says more than half the country doesn't think the government should be involved in our health care in the first place. So, Greg, before we get into the poll numbers, most politicians use these stories. Right? Sam in Iowa, I was on a farm and I met John, a small business owner. They can come back and bite politicians if they're not vetted properly. This one turns out to be a horror story, much like the woman they initially put on the website who wasn't even a citizen. Now 2 women are embarrassed.
Yeah, you're in trouble when your props are falling apart. It's like a grade school version of Pippin. I think Obama is a genius because he realizes that laughter is really the best medicine. And Obamacare, in a way, lowers your stress by being hilariously incompetent. So in a way, he's making us all feel better by being such a disaster. But I have to say, the big question here is this problem for him temporary or is it forever? Because he's been able to extricate himself from everything and move on as if nothing has happened. But this, to me, feels like quicksand. This is his greatest achievement, and it's flimsier than his first pitch. I mean, I don't know how he gets out of this.
That was a bad pitch.
This is a worse pitch. By the way, no, the greater good is now the worser bad. He's taught everybody that when big government succeeds, big government is evil.
And Dana, if you look forward to 2014, you have to anticipate a lot of these businesses are probably going to start to drop coverage because that employer mandate will be running out right up into the point of the midterm election. So tell us a little bit about how a president maybe gets these stories. I mean, should he be angry at the person that handed him the story, maybe the same person that told him the website was good to go?
Well, the interesting thing for him is that later on, that woman, Jennifer Sanford, she actually doesn't blame the president. This is amazing. She says she doesn't blame the president, she doesn't blame the White House, she actually blames the state. This would never happen to any other president. He has some sort of ability to just have all negativity rebound off of him onto somebody else. And so what they do is they gather stories. People find out the political office will gather all sorts of people sending in their information on Twitter or Facebook, and they'll just scour it and look for good stories to tell. And I think storytelling, when it's factual, can be very powerful because it helps you think about, oh, okay, so that explains like my neighbor or my sister or my mom. Okay, I can understand, I can visualize it. That's why Americans and all humans have told stories over the years. It helps you explain something. When it turns out not to be true, obviously that's a problem. I want to mention one thing about what President Obama said earlier today in this interview. He talked about what they have learned with respect to setting up marketplaces is setting those things up is very challenging mechanically. And I think that's the lesson that Americans are learning right now is that government doesn't set up marketplaces well. The marketplace exists and leave it alone, and then we'll hopefully have the results that we would want. Not hopefully, that's how the marketplace works. It
can't make anything, it can only take things. when it tries to make something.
Eric, Senator Marco Rubio had an excellent editorial where he warned about another problem that we've talked about here and you've talked about on Cashin' In, and that is the subsidies that are going to be flying out the door, especially to these insurance companies. I would have to imagine if you're a shareholder, if you're investing in one of these companies, Eric, you've got to be pretty furious and you want to know what are the financial implications. If I'm an insurance CEO, I'm going, you got to prop me up. You promised me all these new enrollees. Where are they?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. And what the concern is that what Obamacare pushed the insurance companies to take high-risk insurees. They said you have to do it, pre-existing conditions, et cetera, along the lines. And they weren't sure how much it was going to cost them. The insurance companies pushed back. And the little-known fact in the Obamacare law said, don't worry, we got the backside. If you're paying out too much money, we're going to come back and pay you for it. But the CBO never scored it, so it was never part of how much Obamacare was sold to us was going to cost. So we don't know. I've been doing homework for 2 days on this, and I can't find it. I've called the Kaiser Foundation. Our brain room can't figure it out. It could be in the billions of dollars of transfer payments that's going to come from Congress to go to the insurance companies. But we've talked about what this is, though. We're talking about this woman, Jennifer Sanford. She's having a problem with the real issue here with Obamacare. It's not the website. You remember the analogy we used? It's a hooker with a cold sore. The cold sore stripper with a cold sore. The cold sore is going to go away, but she's still a stripper. What we're finding out, Obamacare is worse than a stripper. She's a hooker. The costs are skyrocketing. Hold on.
Actually, should it be that she still has herpes?
The tax credits are going to cost us billions upon billions of dollars. Helping out the insurance companies are going to cost billions. But again, the big one, I'll say it again, it's the deductibles. The families that can't afford to put the $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 up in front that they're going to have to do. If you have Obamacare, you have to. It's got to go out of your pocket first. Maybe you'll get your tax credit down the road.
Don't most of them have deductibles now?
Not this size. Nowhere near this. Some of these deductibles, Bob, are 10 times what these families are used to paying.
10 times. And his poll numbers have taken a hit, Bob. You know polls very, very well. The president was out today, and he was trying to spin these negative polls. Take a listen to President Obama, Bob, trying to spin this. Basically, his new argument is, well, it's all relative because in Washington, everyone's doing bad.
We just have to break through the stubborn cycle of crisis politics and start working together. More obstruction, more brinksmanship won't help anybody. It doesn't help folks politically. My understanding is nobody in this town is doing particularly well at the moment when it comes to the opinions of the American people. But it certainly doesn't help anybody economically.
Is that the right message, Bob? Well, I'm not doing well, but Republicans aren't either, so who cares? Whatever.
Look, right now Obama's in a position where he's getting perilously close to I mean, I think it'd be very difficult to pass any major piece of legislation in the remainder of this second term. When you get down around, you hover around the 40% mark, something has to come along to bring that back up. And I don't see anything on the horizon, save some war or something that we don't know about, that's going to do that. Now, having said that, the real issue, as far as I'm concerned, is what does this do to the Democrats in 2014? I don't think you can take the emotions and the feelings about Obamacare today and transplant them 12 months and say, okay, that's going to be the election. One thing we are seeing, in states where the state decided to take on this project themselves, they're doing very, very well. California, Kentucky, Minnesota, Connecticut are running way ahead of what they projected for people signing up. It's the states where they had to go through the federal way, wait a minute, which were almost all Republican states.
No state is doing, no insurance market, state or federal, is doing above what they projected.
California,
in Kentucky, they have lost.
California, Kentucky,
in Kentucky, more people have lost their plans than have signed up for a plan.
Well, if you could believe, I suppose like with all these things, with the statistics we keep hearing, I know that the governor of Kentucky says that the thing has been highly successful. In California, they signed up triple what they did the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, but that's not what they projected.
Right.
They projected 500,000 by the end of the first.
by
November 5th. No, totally. By November.
I'm
November
talking about
15th, they got 100,000. They got 20% of what they projected.
I'm talking about individual states.
Oregon hasn't signed up a single person.
I get what Bob's trying to say. I get what you're trying to say. It's all relative. That's the argument they're trying to make, right? So they're saying instead of the thousands and hundreds of thousands they predicted, 12 people signed up. But maybe in the states it was 15. So the numbers that we got last week from Kathleen Sebelius were slightly better in the states, but they were way below, as Eric points out, what the White House said they would be. Greg, here is the future of the argument leading into 2014. What Bob said, he foreshadowed. President Obama did that as well today. He says basically, we wouldn't be having all these problems if Republicans wouldn't have been more invested in making this work. Listen.
What was already going to be hard was operating within a very difficult political environment, and we should have anticipated that that would create a rockier rollout than if Democrats and Republicans were both invested in success. One of the problems we've had is one side of Capitol Hill is invested in failure, and that makes, I think, the kind of iterative process of fixing glitches as they come up and fine-tuning the law more challenging.
Aha, you heard it. It's the Republicans' fault.
Well, apparently he believes that one side is invested in failure while the other side achieved failure. The one thing you got to point out, last night he had this conference call, and you had to find a website to get onto the conference call to talk about the failed Obamacare website. Turned out the website that you needed to get on to discuss the failed website also failed. So I'm wondering if they're going to get another website up to discuss the failed website that was used to discuss the failed website. In this way, that is the beauty of bureaucracy. Incompetence continues to breed jobs, and it will never end.
It'll be the Republicans'
It's the only
fault,
jobs
though,
program
Dana.
that's
George
ever
Bush
worked.
Well, and that conference call was, the invitation was sent out to his partisan army.
Yeah.
So when he talks about brinksmanship and political crisis and governing that way, do you really think it's a good idea then to just focus on your Democratic army? I also think that he sounds increasingly and constantly resentful and antagonistic and aggressive towards opponents that are pointing out. I mean, we don't even have to point out the failures.
Don't you think he should against the Republicans? You did absolutely nothing about health care, nothing, zero.
But Bob, you are one that should say that when somebody tells you that you have a problem, you should admire that person.
Who did zero?
Right?
Who did zero? Who did, what do you mean?
Republicans did zero.
Did zero on what?
Did
Just because they didn't vote for a bill they disagreed with, you think they've done zero?
No, it's not that. But what I believed all along, that the Republicans basically think that entitlements like Medicare and Medicaid should go away and go back to the states.
How is this their fault, though, Bob? Even your advice to the GOP was to stay away and let Democrats own this mess.
No,
what do you expect them to come in and fix it?
The question politically. What I'm saying is the Republicans, Obama's right to this extent. The Republicans have done nothing about dealing with the health care crisis in this country except carp on Obamacare. They've offered up nothing that makes any sense to me. There's been some on Social Security, but not on Medicare.
We've given you alternatives, Bob. You don't want to hear them. Here's the answer, though. There's one solution, and this is the only solution he's going to have to come to. You have to remove the mandate. You just can't do it. You can't fine people for not having insurance they can't get.
And then the whole thing falls apart. It falls apart at that point.
And it should.
Well, that's my point. You guys want this all to fall apart.
They set it up for failure.
That's what you want to see Medicare,
It's never about
go
getting
away.
people coverage. It was just about getting votes.
You know what IKEA should do?
No,
they should name a bookcase after Obamacare.
That no one can put together.
Yeah,
that's a
and
failure.
then falls apart after 3 months.
The return line at IKEA is longer than the purchase line.
All right. Ahead, more credibility problems for the administration, and it's not just Obamacare. Yes, new developments in the IRS scandal and the administration possibly cooking the books on job numbers during last year's election. Remember that? And later, George Zimmerman back in court. We'll tell you what happened coming up.